The and for everyone, we are recording this. We are recording this um, meeting. So if you don't want to be in the recording, I would turn your camera off. DPD's contracts renew in 2027. In 1 year, the police department did about 5,800 searches, or just over 5,800 searches. And per the policy manual for Durango Police Department, there is no warrant, probable cause, or reasonable suspicion required to use the flock system. A few of us met with the police chief last Friday, and we asked a few questions. They did say that they are considering amending some of the flock contracts, and we're going to talk to our guests about what that could mean. And they don't have good data for how many investigations were closed due to flock. So they don't have reliable information on how many investigations were closed due to flock. And the total contract value of the two flock contracts in Durango, I don't know Fort Lewis College's figure, but for Durango Police Department, it's 169,050 over spread out over 2 years. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Katya, who is one of our organizers, who will introduce our panelists for tonight. I'm really excited for this discussion. I think y'all will find the panelists are both extremely knowledgeable and committed to building grassroots opposition to mass surveillance technology. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katya. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thanks, Ben. Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name's Katya Speaker. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a activist and organizer here in Durango, Colorado. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. I have been excited for this conversation all day long, all week long, more like. Before we get started, I just want to welcome you. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, so go ahead and start. As we go, put your questions in the chat. We're going to be collecting those and kind of trying to put them into categories because we know you'll probably have quite a few of them. But I want to start off with introducing our guests tonight. And first, I'm going to introduce Anaya Robinson. Welcome, Anaya is a public policy director for the American Civil Liberties Union of Colorado. He is a Latin queer trans man born and raised in West Michigan who now calls Denver home. Outside of his day job, he is one of two co-founders of Transformative Freedom Fund. He has been working in policy advocacy with a systems focus and nonprofit management for over a decade. And I believes firmly that collectively working from an intersectional anti-oppressive lens is the only way to fully dismantle systems of privilege and power and achieve true equity and justice. Thanks for being here, Anaya. Hello. And Will Freeman, hi Will, is a Boulder, Colorado software engineer who created the deFlock me website in .me website in 2024 to push back against invasive mass surveillance. deFlock is an open source collaborative platform that has mapped the locations of nearly 62,000 license plate readers around the world. The deFlock project also includes resources for learning about LPRs, which are license plate readers. You'll hear us say that a couple of times tonight. Tips for how to speak to city council members, a mobile app, and an active community on Discord. Because of his work on deFlock, Will received a cease and desist letters from Flock Safety and was accused of copyright infringement and disseminating false information to the company. So we'll be hearing about that in a little bit. Thank you both for being here tonight. I think you should be able to unmute yourselves. If not, I can take care of that as well. But Will, I actually wanted to start with you first, if that's okay. Just kind of want a general sense for those of us who are brand new to this idea of these cameras and flock in general. Would you mind just kind of giving us just a really brief general overview of what flock is, how these flock systems work generally, and whether they collect video, whether they collect just photos? What do they do, Will? Oh, hang on, we gotta unmute you for a sec.
Yeah. Can you hear me
There we
now?
go. Yes,
Yes.
there we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Flock cameras, they're internet connected cameras that take pictures of anything that like crosses its path. So typically they're positioned on roadways so that if a car drives by, it'll snap a picture of every car that drives by. Um, the yeah, they currently at the moment, they take like still pictures of cars that pass by. They know the location of that car because they know the location of the actual license plate reader, and they're all networked together. So if you go from one side of town to the other, or if you like make a right turn on the street, a left turn on the other street, with enough lock cameras, you can have a pretty thorough picture of what path you're taking through a city. And yeah, that data is stored usually at least 30 days. I believe 30 days is what Durango has. But yeah, so the cameras they take a picture of a vehicle, they analyze features of it, so like the make, model, color, whether there are any roof racks or back racks or window stickers or bumper stickers, anything that you can see with your eyes. These cameras can see, and they will turn that into a searchable metric. Um, yeah. So then the photos these cameras take, along with all of the decoded data, are then inserted into a database. And that database can be searched really, really easily. A lot of people think that you might need a warrant for it, or you have to go through this approval process, but you don't. It's kind of like Google or ChatGPT. You type in your search parameters and you hit search, and yeah, there is a reason field. You can type in whatever reason you want, that gets logged. But yes, like you can search it like immediately. There is no, yeah, there's pretty much no regulation for it. Um, so yeah, while yeah, they capture pictures of everyone who drives by. It's marketed as a tool to solve crime because it provides evidence to say that hey, this vehicle was here at this time. But it doesn't only provide evidence that criminals are doing crime. I mean, well, it doesn't. It provides images that a criminal was at a certain place, but it also provides images that innocent people were here at this time. And the majority of pictures captured by these cameras and data that's analyzed for them are innocent people. And that's one of the biggest concerns with these things.
Nice. Thank you. Well done. That's a hard thing to sum up in just a few sentences. So thank you. That was a big question. And I want to turn to you. With ACLU Colorado, we're just wanting to hear what your work has been here lately in Colorado. A lot of people have heard about what's going on in Denver regarding these cameras. Would you mind kind of talking about that a little bit, what your work has been with that, and then also what are the dangers of these cameras? Give us a sense of that if you can.
Yeah. So the ACLU of Colorado has been working in a lot of local areas throughout the state in regards to flock. Most of our affiliate network across the country is working in some capacity on this issue, as is our national office. Um, Flock is deeply concerning to us. In Denver, that conversation really started back in April, when Denver Police Department was looking to extend and expand their contract. Currently, the contract in Denver, well, previously, the contract in Denver had been under the threshold of what triggers city council approval. So Flock has been operating in Denver for over a year. And most city council members were completely unaware of the fact until it came before them on the agenda for approval, which is pretty common for flock contracts, but for surveillance tech contracts as a whole, they tend to be relatively affordable for local governments, which means that often they are not having to seek approval through a legislative process to make that conversation public. Um, we were able to work with a fairly large coalition of folks in Denver, to ensure that that contract extension and expansion was voted down unanimously by Denver City Council. And an outcome of that was that the mayor's office created a surveillance task force that we now sit on, that I maintain hope will become useful at some point. Um, But since then, Denver actually was operating Flock for several months between April and the summertime with no contract in place whatsoever. They did initiate a contract extension that then ran through the end of October. And the mayor's office and DPD negotiated a new contract with some different terms. That has yet to be executed. So Flock has again been operational in Denver with no contract in place since the end of October at this point. And to my knowledge, that contract extension has not been executed yet. We've also been able to work in Louisville with some organizers there. And back in September, they voted down their Flock contract as well. So Louisville ended that contract with Flock. We're also doing some work in Longmont, starting to have some conversations in Greeley, and here to talk with all of you fine folks as well, and having some conversations with city council members in Edgewater too. But I think a lot of our concerns around Flock are coupled with what Will was talking about in building this now national network of surveillance, right? And the privacy implications of that, the Fourth Amendment implications of that, and what that means just for the general population going about our day-to-day lives, but especially for vulnerable communities, and especially for folks who are coming to Colorado to access reproductive and gender affirming care that may have been felonized in their home state, and the ability to utilize Flock to track those folks across state lines as well. There's obviously also some really deep implications for immigrants when it comes to Flock use. That I think one of our concerns within the context of Colorado too is that because of our shield laws and because of both Senate Bill 21-131 and Senate Bill 25-276, there's some real liability implications for both state and local law enforcement in regards to utilizing a system like Flock that has a national sharing network when we have prohibitions on the sharing of certain data. And the immigration protection statutes that we have specifically call out a license plate number as personally identifiable data that is prohibited to be shared for the purposes of immigration enforcement. So law enforcement across the state, if they're utilizing a network, if they're utilizing Flock or a network similar to it, because I want to be clear too, Flock is not the only ALPR system that operates in this manner any longer. They could very well and unintentionally be violating state law.
Right. And that's the Senate bill that you were talking about, that you were referencing, in case folks aren't familiar with that. Great. Thank you for that. Thank you for that as well. I'm interested too, and Will, feel free to chime in too on any of these questions. Goes for both of you if you want to add anything to what the other person has said as well. But in general, I guess, and this is kind of, I think, a little bit of a question for both of you. We've heard quite a bit from Durango officials that our data is safe, that Durango owns that data, and ICE doesn't have access to it. However, that's not what a lot of us have been finding when we read more about these cameras and about Flock safety as a company. I'd love to hear both of your points on that. And Anaya, if you want to go ahead and start, and then Will, if you can chime in after that, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, data in general is only as safe as the system that's holding it, right? And I think we know that technology works at an extremely fast pace, and hackers work at a significantly faster pace often. And for-profit companies aren't necessarily the most trustworthy often if there is something of value that they have access to. I think something that's important to remember too is that contractually, Flock gives ownership of the data at its point of collection to the law enforcement agency, the private entity that they're contracting with, right? But there are also provisions in these contracts that say if they anonymize the data, they have sole and unlimited ownership of that data and can do whatever they want with it. One of the other things that we know with the contract extension in Denver and the amendatory agreement with that extension that hasn't been executed yet is that Flock has an internal policy around when they share information with law enforcement, regardless of what their contractual agreement says. When there is an emergency, when there's exigent circumstances, it is unclear what their definition of emergency or exigent circumstances is and whether or not they are kind of aligning that with Fourth Amendment thresholds. So if a law enforcement agency, another government agency were to go to Flock and say, we're having an emergency or there are exigent circumstances and we need access to this data, based on that mandatory agreement language for Denver, Flock will just give it to them. So while the law enforcement entity may own the data, that doesn't mean that Flock doesn't have unlimited access to it and is potentially still doing what they want with that access. There's also some issues around the data retention periods too, where in the Flock contracts, it's a general 30-day data retention period for the data that is collected. But there is also language in the contracts that says they are regularly backing that data up and they don't have a data retention period for backed up data. So we actually don't know how long Flock is keeping this data in any meaningful way. And again, once the data is anonymized, they can do whatever they want with that data. That we as people out here in community may not be wanting, selling it to other companies, utilizing it for training algorithms to decipher what traffic patterns are for certain makes and models and years of vehicles, things of that nature. And we also know that Flock in some circumstances has not necessarily complied with the terms of their contractual agreements either. So
Right.
it's really impossible to know whether or not any of the data is even as safe as the contract state it is, which isn't very safe to begin with.
To begin with, right? Yeah, yeah. Thanks. Well, did you want to weigh in on that at all?
Yeah.
What
Is
you
this
think
just
about this data being safe?
okay? Yeah. Well, yeah. As far as ownership, that is just contract language. They do not, in practice, own the data. It's all on Flock's infrastructure, and they're the ones with the closed source software, the black box system that's actually processing this. A few months ago, Border Patrol was discovered having access to over 80,000 cameras, which was consistent with the numbers on the national network at the time. So I believe, and a lot of other people believe, they were on the national network. And that was without a lot of these law enforcement agencies' knowledge. They only found out about it after the fact. Boulder was one of them. They supposedly didn't know they were on the national network, but when I actually requested records for them showing that and handed it back over to them, then they shut off national sharing, which I mean is better than nothing, but it still is bad. And it goes to show that you don't have as much control over this data as you like. And giving one company control over it all creates a single point of failure. And yeah, like it can be encrypted or whatever, but like encryption doesn't matter if the proper access controls aren't put in place. Yeah, it's not very safe. Flock themselves have had a ton of vulnerabilities reported with their cameras specifically. And if you watch the last Ben Jordan video on YouTube, that talks about many of them, including one where you can remotely access images captured by just by using a stick and hitting the button on the back of it, and it spins up a Wi-Fi network. You connect to it. They're not very secure. Other vendors are also not very secure. Motorola, for example, a company that's been around in the police industry for about 100 years, they have their own license plate readers. And just earlier this year, they were caught having like hundreds of their license plate readers streaming data to the open internet. No password, no encryption, no anything. You could just connect to it, get a live feed. You could get photos of every car that's passed it. You can get decoded details that are being done on the actual license plate reader. So yeah, that's not specific to Flock, but it goes to show that collecting this data is super, super dangerous. And there's very little you can do to protect it because people are going to want your historical location information. That's valuable data. And there are a lot of bad people who will take advantage of that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that, Will. both of you were mentioning, I think, the Fourth Amendment to a certain degree, Anaya especially. We're wondering, legal challenges to this kind of surveillance. We've heard of quite a few across the country. Um, secrecy of data and public records requests and things like that. Anaya, what are the court and legal challenges to these systems that you've been hearing about, and that are sort of on your radar for Colorado or your area? And then also, um, I guess I'm just also sort of wondering, as far as legality goes, with holes in this system, as we've talked about with Flock, is our city and our police department susceptible to that liability or to that risk potentially?
Yeah, so there's been a few cases in federal courts throughout the country. There's a case currently in Norfolk, Virginia, kind of testing that Fourth Amendment theory with Flock. Um, there's not really any solid case law as of right now. Not to say that there won't be in the future. Uh, to say that Flock absolutely and definitively violates the Fourth Amendment, right? Um, there's been some outcomes that have said essentially like there is a real possibility that Flock could violate Fourth Amendment rights, but the number of cameras necessary to do so doesn't exist in this jurisdiction, without any real indicator of what number of cameras would need to exist for that to occur, right? But that case was also from a few years ago, and I think with the increase in law enforcement contracts with Flock, and the increase in connectedness nationally because of their sharing network, the likelihood that it would be easier for a court to decide that there is a Fourth Amendment violation with the use of these systems, I think gets higher and higher every day. I think the important thing to remember too in the context of Colorado is that while we may have a current Supreme Court that's not super interested in upholding the civil liberties of the vast majority of us, we do have a similar constitutional protection in Colorado state constitution. So if we are seeing these cases go through the federal courts and not really upholding what we at the ACLU believe to be true when it comes to civil liberties and the implications of those with the use of Flock and other types of surveillance technology, those theories can also be tested in the state courts. So I think that's an important component, and I think there are real vulnerabilities for local law enforcement across the state and for the state itself because State Patrol and CBI both have Flock contracts as well. But in regards to those constitutional questions, there's a vulnerability and a potential liability there, depending on what a court decides, whether or not those civil liberties were violated with the use of Flock. But back to what I was speaking about a little bit earlier, there's an additional layer of vulnerabilities and liability for law enforcement in Colorado because of our state statutes, right? And especially in regards to immigration. Senate Bill 131 created a statute that said essentially that no state department can share personally identifiable information for the purposes of immigration enforcement. And in that bill, the definition of personally identifiable information explicitly includes a license plate number. It also includes other information as well. But we are extremely unique as a state in that a license plate number is generally not determined to be personally identifiable information. But in Colorado, under that statute, it is. And then Senate Bill 25276 that was passed earlier this year expanded Senate Bill 131 to include all governments across the state. So all local governments, municipalities, counties, all law enforcement agencies across the state as well, which really creates that vulnerability when sharing on that national network or sharing with other jurisdictions even. That if anyone is utilizing that flock data collected from a local law enforcement agency for the purposes of immigration enforcement, they could very well be violating state law, as well as really skirting whether or not they are in violation of Fourth Amendment rights.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think we were talking about the Fourth Amendment, but there has already been outside of that lawsuits against city police departments when there were errors in the system and reading a plate in the wrong way or incorrectly, pulling over people that they didn't intend to because the plate reader wasn't accurate. That happened in Aurora. There was a lawsuit that was settled for $1.9 million against the police department there because they pulled over a family in a vehicle that they thought was stolen, and it turned out that that wasn't the case. And so the city then had to pay and settle at 1.9 million for that. So I wanted to just mention that other, risk as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with systems like Flock too, when you think about misidentification of people, wrongful arrests, wrongful interaction with law enforcement when somebody should not have been pulled over or approached in the first place, is that with Flock, when you're looking for a license plate, right, with a traditional automatic license plate reader, and the way that they generally function, solely searchable with license plate numbers, you're looking for a unique identifier. And that license plate can be moved from car to car, right? But if you identify the number, if it's an accurate identification, then you know you've found the right license plate at the very least, right? Unless there's a glitch in the system or the photo is skewed and it's hard to, match. But with Flock, you can search for make, model, color of car, year. You can search for dents. You can search for roof racks. You can search for bumper stickers. So the ability of Flock takes what once was at foundation a unique identifier, right? And significantly broadens that.
All right.
So if law enforcement were to go into Flock and say, I'm looking for a 2020 white Subaru Outback, that's probably not a great search to use in a state like Colorado. And it's going to pull up a lot of pings for a lot of people. And then law enforcement is just going to use their discretion to pick which white Subaru they actually want to go and pull over.
Right.
And we're no longer getting a unique identifier with technology that we know is already flawed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Will, I'm wondering if you wanted to weigh in on what we were just talking about, and also if you don't have anything necessarily on those items, just like what the oversight is for these companies, who's sort of paying attention to what they're doing in the systems and their systems. Is there any oversight you're aware of?
Yeah, there's very little oversight. So, you'll hear a lot that there are audit logs. Every search that's done is logged, and that's true. They are mutable. There are some things that can change just because of how they implemented it. I don't know if they fixed that yet. But yeah, for the most part, there are audit logs that show who accessed the system and when. Police departments like to say that they look through those, but if you're on the national network, like Durango is, or at least was as of October 5th, 2025, there are usually between 10 and 15,000 searches per day. From different agencies across the entire United States. And if police are already short-staffed, I don't know how they can review all 10 to 15,000 requests per day and make sure they're legitimate and contextually relevant to what's being searched. The answer is they can't. These audit logs, while they're useful if you already suspect something, they're completely useless when it comes to actually making sure people are using these cameras correctly. They're very, very underregulated. I don't think Colorado has a state law that regulates this yet. There's one that's being drafted that's like weak at the moment. Hopefully it'll get stronger. There's not much oversight. The oversight is people making public records requests and going to like reporters and saying, hey, we see this pattern in suspicious Flock searches. Like, can you report on this? And then that has some effect. That's the only oversight that I know of. And like other agencies that are granted access, like if let's say you're on the national network, someone else on the national network can search your cameras without there's no formal request process. They type in your license plate number, they hit search, they get results from your camera. So there's no the Boulder police chief said that there was some formal process where a supervisor had to approve, but he completely lied about that. There's very, very little oversight. These systems can basically be used however they want. Flock likes to reply to statements like that. And if people see things like, oh, you were searching for immigration, well, then their solution is to give you a drop down box with a few options in it rather than let you type in the real reason. So it encourages dishonesty. So I feel like they're moving in the wrong direction.
Mhm.
These are, yeah, very dangerous systems, and they're not, there's very, very little oversight.
So is it
And
correct, Will, that like, oh, sorry, Anaya, is it correct too, Will, that like at any point that or depending on the police department and the how they have the security set up within the flock system, that a police officer could enter essentially any reason and then be able to easily access the system and the images that are within it?
Yes, yeah, nothing's verifying that the reason is actually accurate. So you can put the
Right.
reason as missing person or something, and you can search for your ex that you want to track.
Good.
And as
Right.
long as no one notices, you'll get away with it.
Right. And then sometimes there's also not case numbers that are required either. Is that correct? Like active cases.
Last time I checked, yeah, case number was optional, and in a lot of the public records I've gotten, I'd say about 5% were actually filled. I don't know if that's the case anymore. I think specific agencies can require case numbers for their, at least for their officers or for their cameras.
Yeah.
But again, kind of like reason, you can put in a legitimate case number that's like real, but it's not related to the search you're doing. So you're just making a log that looks good but isn't actually good.
Right, right. Anaya, did you want to chime in there?
I was actually going to bring up the lack of requirement for a case number too, that it makes it, I mean, you can put in a case number, you can put in a reason, and it doesn't mean it's legitimate, but not requiring a case number makes it near impossible to decipher whether or not any search was legitimate.
Right. Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. Um, Anaya, we're wondering too, so one of the major concerns that we've been talking about a little bit as organizers is the uh, most recently the National Security Presidential Memo, NSPM-7, that ordered essentially the Attorney General and several other agencies and Pam Bondi to compile a list of groups or entities engaged in acts that may constitute domestic terrorism. Basically, anyone who disagrees with the current administration and the president's agenda. That includes, quote, extreme viewpoints on immigration, radical gender ideology, and anti-American sentiment. The memo includes prioritizing funding to programs for state and local law enforcement to go after said domestic terrorists that they put on this essentially a blacklist. And it creates a system to solicit tips as well, like for purported domestic terrorists, using a cash reward system. So, can you explain the broader risks of having this system in our communities, given sort of the tone of the current administration and this NSPM-7 memo?
Yeah, I mean, the use of Flock, the use of surveillance tech, but Flock makes it extremely affordable and extremely easy to track all of us, where we're going, who we're going with, what we're doing. I mean, it creates a visible record of what we do day to day, where we frequent, how we get there. Um, and it's concerning, right? I think when we have a federal government requesting information on people that they think are dangerous because we disagree with them, giving them access to more data to know where we're going, which in turn to them could very easily feel like more evidence as to how we are, not complying with authoritarianism in the right way. Um, it puts all of us at risk in a lot of ways and in a lot of reasons, and I think that's one of the things that is so concerning about such a prevalent use of this type of technology in the current landscape, is that we should be doing everything that we possibly can to minimize the amount of data being collected about all of us. And what we see local law enforcement agencies doing is really maximizing the amount of data being collected about all of us, sharing it across jurisdictions, but more importantly, giving it to a for-profit private company that has no bounds to civil rights and civil liberties.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about flock safety for a second. Will, would you mind talking about them? What are they like as a company? What have you learned about them in your experience and your personal experience as well?
Yeah. I think they're a really unethical company.
Mhm.
Uh, they repeatedly violate state laws and don't really, uh, they violate state laws a lot. So like Illinois and California, they have laws against sharing certain license plate reader information outside of the state. They gave them a checkbox that it was really just a checkbox that says like enable national lookup or something. It's kind of intentionally confusing. It's like, oh, I'm going to grant you access to search the entire country. That's great. But what it also does is it grants everyone else in the country access to your data, and that was a clear violation of those state laws. They eventually, after it made like national news, they fixed that, but they had no desire to prevent that from happening in the first place. In several states, they've also installed their cameras without permits, and they kind of defended it by saying like, "Oh, like we're doing something important. We're trying to save a kid's life, and you're worried about us like making a little mistake." But no, yeah, they try to sneak these things into. So like a, a big reason a lot of people in the Zoom call are probably hearing about this for the first time now or recently is because Flock doesn't want you to know about them. They they try to stay hidden, and they did for a while. They did a great job at that. They sneak things into the consent agenda on city council meetings. They disguise it as public safety equipment or situational awareness tools, things that sound really harmless and people are very likely to vote yes on. Uh, and then and now we have over like 102,000 flock cameras in the US that are on the national network. So even more than that. And it's grown probably by 20,000 in the last few months. So they're on track to put one in like most cities in the US. It's kind of scary. They don't like free speech. Like you mentioned with the cease and desist, they wanted to hurt my site and make it harder for people to find it. They sent two legal threats, cease and desist. And then in a Forbes interview, they called my site a terroristic organization because apparently mapping the locations of these cameras and expressing my opinion on them is terroristic in their opinion. Um, when really they're the ones who are collecting very sensitive data that actual terrorists can use to do bad things.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
they lied, or they lie all the time. They lied about not having any federal contracts. They did that several times. Um,
Huh, huh.
so it took like it usually always takes like a news station to put out a story that says they lied for them to actually correct things because they just don't care and they will lie about whatever they can get away with if it works in their interests.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Thanks for sharing that. And did you want to add anything to what Will just was talking about?
No, I mean, other than I completely agree. They're
Yeah. I think on that note,
not to be trusted.
yeah. I think part of the interview you had Anaya on KSUT and KDUR, um, you mentioned basically, and Will touched on this, which reminded me of it, that um, a lot of times Flock is sort of like sneaking their system into different cities and municipalities without really the city council knowing, without people within that community knowing, without city council voting on it, um, or maybe even really knowing the full, implications of the system and what the details of the contract are. I think all of us are guilty of not always knowing what the details of a contract are. Do you have thoughts on how are communities sort of pushing back against Flock and police departments and cities after they've already been installed, like in the situation with Durango? You had mentioned basically the idea of having, how do we make sure that the people within Durango are consenting to these acts and to this kind of to these cameras everywhere in their community? What do we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest, though it's not actually easy in application route, is to work with city council to ensure that there is a regulatory framework in your ordinance that regulates the use of these systems, regulates when they have to go through city council approval. We firmly believe that when any type of surveillance tech is being used by a government entity, it should go through a public legislative approval process. When our civil liberties are in question, we should always know about it. And we should get to decide if the weighing of, our civil liberties versus the potential for safety, if that's weighed evenly enough for us to consent to the erosion of our civil liberties. And the way that Flock has operated, they've really eliminated communities' ability to engage in that process. So one of the things that can be done is really pushing city councils, pushing mayors, pushing county commissioners to create statutory regulations for the use of these systems. And that's one of the things that we're focused on doing in Denver. It's one of the things that we are absolutely here and open to helping with in any local government across the state. But I think one of the other things at Baseline that folks can do is what I've seen so much of in the chat that I know so many of you are already doing is public records requests and getting the information that you need, that your city council members, that your mayor, that your other elected officials might not have, and getting it for yourselves, but then also sharing it with community, sharing it with those elected officials to ensure that everybody has the information necessary to know how these systems are working. Putting in a core request for the contract itself, reading them, figuring out what they say and what they very often, unfortunately, do not say. But a contract is never going to be as protective as a statute. And one of the things that we really need to focus on is ensuring that we are trusting a public legislative process more than we are trusting private companies and the words that they put on paper that will cost them less to breach than it will to maintain the profit margins that they get from the access to the data that our government is giving them.
Yeah, I've heard them called by others data brokers. Can you explain that a little bit? I mean, and then Will, please chime in there too. I saw you kind of nodding. What does that actually mean? I mean, why is Flock interested in really spreading their network everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, I would assume there's at least some people at Flock who would love the idea of a national network of surveillance. But I think more so as a private company, right? Flock can really capitalize on the collection of that much data nationally. They can capitalize on it by building new technologies themselves. They can capitalize on it by selling that data to other companies to build technologies. They can sell it to other companies to run through their algorithms for marketing purposes. I mean, there's an unlimited use when data is collected on this scale for where they can profit from that data.
Yeah, Will, did you want to weigh in on that at all?
No, that's basically what I would have said. Yeah, they collect really valuable data. And because they're in so many communities, I would say they could basically track every American, nearly every American, no matter where they are. Yeah, if you travel like across the country, you're going to be picked up by these things. If you like go off the interstate and stop for gas, it's really dangerous data. And yeah, they say they don't sell data, and while they might not go to a company and say, hey, you want to buy all this location data, they're essentially selling it through their contracts with other agencies. Like that's the reason they're so popular. They have so much data. I was at Longmont City Council last night, and the police department was really, really, really upset at the idea of considering even another vendor, just because they wouldn't get access to that data that was collected everywhere else. So the real effect it has is cities are going to go with them or any other company that has a ton of location data, because it's super valuable. So yeah, while they say they don't sell data, they do, and that's how they do it. Right now, they can change that at any time if they change their contract during a renewal or something. They can, if they change their contract, then they're able to sell it to insurance companies and anyone else who's interested in that information.
Right. One final question I just wanted to ask, I guess, before we start to move into some of the chat questions that have come in. Thanks everyone, by the way, for sending in all those questions. If you haven't yet, go ahead and, pop those in there. We've got a good list started so far, which is great. Something that our police department, a sentiment they've expressed, which I'm curious how either of you would respond to, is that, right now the data for Durango Police Department in our city is a 30-day data retention. So they hang on to the data for 30 days before it's deleted. Um, their argument is that if it solves even one crime in those 30 days, then it's worth holding on to that data, all of that data for 30 days. Do either of you have thoughts on that statement or thoughts on the retention of 30 days versus shorter retention periods?
Yeah, I don't think it's worth it. The risks like greatly outweigh the benefits. Um, yeah, like the idea of collecting location data on like American citizens is just it's really messed up, and it definitely doesn't align with the spirit of the Fourth Amendment. So I guess we'll have to see how those cases play out to see if it's considered a Fourth Amendment violation. But um, if they feel they really need these LPRs, it's possible for them to be implemented without collecting data. For example, you can. I don't know any vendor that currently offers this. This is just like an imaginary product, but you could have a license plate reader that is sent a list of things to look for. Like it's sent a list of like 50 plates that a cop has a warrant for. They've like actually talked to a judge and made sure they had probable cause to like to get a warrant to search for that person. And then they can send that to the license plate reader. The license plate reader will look at every vehicle that passes by, not send it to a database anywhere because there's no need for that. And just like compare it with the list of what they see. And then it can alert, say, I think this car is right here. I think that would be a lot safer. And yeah, like the retention periods, yeah, zero retention is best. Any retention is dangerous because yeah, it is closed source software. You don't know if they're actually following that retention policy. I would think that they have incentive not to. They just might not allow the user to access, but no one really knows that unless you work for Flock. So
Okay.
yeah.
Anaya, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Will, and I think the question is nuanced, right? In some situations, and then I think about what happened right outside of Denver a month or so ago, where somebody they allegedly solved a crime for petty theft using Flock. And I don't know that the erosion of our civil liberties is ever going to be worth figuring out that someone stole something that's valued at under $100, right? I think our Fourth Amendment rights are much more important than that, and always will be. I think the other thing to consider too is when we're talking about the erosion of our civil liberties and weighing that with the solving of crime. I think the important thing to remember is that I have never heard anybody make that statement to say, well, if it prevents one crime, then it's worth it. So we're talking about harm that has already been done.
Right.
And removing our right to privacy to figure out what happened after the harm was caused. And that's what this system especially is a great tool for, right? It's great for solving crime. There is almost no instance of surveillance technology being used that prevents crime, that prevents harm from happening. And while it is out there potentially solving crime, it is creating significant harm while doing so.
All right, so let's go ahead and dive into some of our questions here. Thanks again, everyone. And thank you, Ben and Kirby, for your background assistance on compiling a lot of these. So the first question we have in here, which is probably generalized from a lot of people, is I mean, you kind of answered this a little bit, Anaya. Are public requests for the data perhaps the best way to get cities to consider and maybe turn the cameras off, and cancel or not renew contracts, as in, I think, what's been going on in the state of Washington?
Yeah, I mean, I think public records requests are extremely helpful for a lot of reasons, but to ensure that your local government knows that people are watching and people are aware. And I think, like I said earlier, extremely helpful in ensuring that your local elected officials know that Flock is being used and these contracts exist. Um, I think I think that's helpful. I think really pushing city council members to enact regulatory ordinances. I think collectively organizing in community to put things on the ballot if you don't have a city council that is amenable to passing a regulatory ordinance in this space. Um, and I think a lot of that collection of data too through records requests to inform yourselves as to whether or not you have enough evidence to show that your civil liberties have been violated. And if so, filing.
Mhm.
Because the one thing that speaks to every government, right, is budgetary impact. And something that causes a huge budgetary impact is losing constitutional violation cases.
So, Will, did you want to add in anything to that question or?
No, I don't have much for that.
Okay. So based on the data that you two know about, which communities are disproportionately monitored by flock cameras, and what does that reveal about perhaps any bias of these surveillance systems? Are you aware of that?
I know some people have done studies. I think Institute for Justice might have done one. Another organization did too. I don't remember what they found. But yeah, I guess they are disproportionately deployed, for sure. And you can see that just by like looking at where they are on a map.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I don't have like, yeah, I haven't analyzed it myself personally, so I'm not sure. I would have to look that up.
Yeah, and from what I've seen, the kind of disproportionate impact of flock cameras is pretty consistent with what we see data wise in regards to disproportionate impact of surveillance as a whole, right? We know that Black and brown communities, low income communities are generally over policed across the country, within Colorado as well. And from what I have seen, it tends to match that flow in most communities. There are some local governments that have pretty explicit regulations around equitably surveilling their community members, which is always kind of funny. But generally speaking, I think it tracks with what we tend to all know about which communities have focused.
Mhm. Okay. Um, the two of you may know that we did, well, we've had plenty of ICE activity in this community in the past year. And more recently, in October, with members of a family that were kidnapped. I think this question is probably coming with that in mind. Is there any evidence or records that show whether or not local ICE traffic stops were flock aided at this point that you've heard of?
I think that kind of goes back to what Will was talking about earlier when it comes to like the audit logs, the requirements for doing a search, and how easy it is to do a search in the Flock system. Um, because we're requiring, not we, because Flock is requiring very limited information to do a search and not requiring any verification of that information to do said search, it is near impossible to connect a stop, an arrest, anything of that nature with the use of Flock directly unless there is a, a legal proceeding and that flock search is utilized as evidence in that proceeding.
Yeah. Um, I think this one might be more for you, Will. But let's see. Oh, hang on, we're reordering a little bit. Okay, cool. So this could probably be a rather quicker answer, but just wondering, do LPRs take pictures of people and not just cars?
I mean, it would depend on the vendor. I can speak for Flock. They take pictures of anything that's in front of it. So like I've stood in front of us in front of a camera before, like with a sign saying, "Hey, this is a Flock camera." Um, and yes, I could see the infrared going off. Security researchers have looked at it too, and they do take pictures of like people or whatever is in front of it. That information is stored on the device. It's supposed to be deleted, but they found that it actually wasn't. They found like images all the way going back to where it was made at a factory. So it does stay there, and you, yeah, but it unless they have a machine learning model running on the actual camera, a very basic one that basically says, is this like a human or a bike or a car? And if it's some kind of vehicle, those are the ones they actually upload. So yeah, and like it's not perfect. I'm sure it could get some wrong. Like these aren't like high powered computers, so their their classification is probably not perfect. But no, in general, usually the images that end up being uploaded to the database are like vehicles and bicycles. Yeah.
Okay.
And I just real quick, Katya, I have to hop off. I have to get to another thing, but I'm gonna put my email in the chat. If anybody has any burning questions or wants to talk more about this, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here, Anaya. Thanks so much. All the best to you. All right, so we're looking through a few more questions here. Just wanted to check the time. Okay, great. So Will, what do you and yeah, we could add Ben in this conversation as well if you want to chime in, Ben.
Yeah, I can help answer at least some of the local.
A few of these. Yeah. So yeah, one of the questions was what types of local laws can be proposed to stop or limit flock cameras, and what are some examples of community mobilizations that have worked elsewhere? How do we ensure that our efforts are center and protect our immigrant community?
Yeah, I guess that's a little outside of my wheelhouse, but uh, what what could work is I guess not allowing police departments to just buy anything they want, or I guess like subscribe to it in this case. And it should, yeah, they should have to go through city council or some kind of committee that weighs the pros and cons and decides like what's actually best. Because yeah, like to them it's a tool. They love their tools. It helps them do their job, but that's their interest, and we need to make sure we're not just considering what can help them do their job, but also everyone's civil liberties. So, creating, I guess, some kind of process that they have to go through to get anything, I guess, surveillance related would be great. Other communities, I mean, I guess this isn't like creating a law, but they've influenced their council enough to get rid of flock just by like terminating the contract. But that is just like a one-time solution. Like other products will pop up. License plate readers, I mean, they're really popular right now, but they're not the only form of surveillance. There are like a million other things, and any camera can be a license plate reader. Flock sells a product that turns them into that. There's a lot of surveillance tech out there, and it's just going to continue to be pushed to police departments. So we do need something that slows them down to make sure that it's what we want.
Will, do you know how many cities or communities have taken down license plate readers like this once they've been put up?
Yes, I think the current number is like 22 or 23 based on what I know. I do record it on the deFlock website. It's not completely up to date. I still have stuff to add to it, but I think that shows maybe like around 20. They're being, yeah, communities are adding them faster than they're getting removed.
Mhm. Mhm. All right, so let's see, another question. I think we got three.
I think I've got,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
go ahead.
I'll ask one. The one that I have was, um, do the I'm sorry, I was reading it and then I lost it. Um, so obviously, you've created the deFlock website, and that was about, um, you know, mapping the locations of where all these are. What other types of strategies? We've also talked about, we've alluded to passing like local ordinances, having city council cancel contracts. Someone in the chat had asked about, um, were there other types of action against these devices that people have done? I mean, like, what are other ways in which you've seen, um, or strategies that you've seen like communities use to kind of push back against these types of things?
Um, yeah, I'm not really sure. Yeah, the most effective way has just been like going to council. I say most effective, but like doesn't always work. A lot of councils are more willing to listen to the police department than they are to like their citizens. Others have like a balance, and others are more likely to listen to their citizens. So yeah, I haven't really seen many instances of people taking them down themselves. It's pretty risky. And like someone in Florida tried that. He got charged with a bunch of felonies and then he got caught because it's a surveillance device and he was caught by other surveillance devices doing that. So that's, yeah, not something that's likely to work long term. And then, yeah, they would just put it back up on taxpayers' expense. So, uh, yeah, I mean, besides uh, trying to get legislation or to get your city council to develop some kind of like ordinance to protect you guys. Yeah, that's all I know right now.
Yeah.
The Katya, do you think, are there more questions that you have for Will, or should we let folks from the audience, raise their hand if they want to ask a question directly or make a comment to the group?
I think we should open it up. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, so if you'd like to address everyone in the room, if you can ask a question to us, you can just make a statement, whatever you'd like to do. Put your hand up, raise your hand in the chat, and we'll ask you to unmute, and let's hear what you have to say. Is everyone a little shy? Does anybody have their hand up right now? There we go. Laura, let's put you up there. Uh, Kirby, can you help me out?
Oh, there we go. Okay. I was like, yeah, I can't unmute myself, which makes a lot of sense. I'm happy to break the ice to just say thank you so much for organizing this event. It's been incredibly informative, and I feel a little bit silly now as a Boulder resident that I have missed some of your events, Will. So I'll be following those more closely. No questions here, just really grateful for the information. My brain is very full on, yeah, just getting informed and realizing like how local this issue was to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
Okay, I see Brittany Miller's got her hand up.
Hey, yeah, I would like to know if we got any sort of resolution on DPD saying that, they're only using it as a license plate reader. They're not using it for any sort of other facial pictures or anything like that. But somebody at the council meeting last week said they had it up on some of the trails where only people are on bikes and walking.
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit of, a few of us sat down with the police chief and his staff last Friday. There's a little bit of confusion in the way he talks about these systems because there's DPD has they have the license plate reader cameras, which are called the Flock Falcon cameras. And then there's also this Flock mobile trailer that they have that you currently can see by the pickleball courts. And a lot of times when they say it doesn't take video, they're talking about the Falcon cameras. But when they talked about the mobile trailer specifically, they said, yes, it does take video. We do use it to monitor the area. And I was also seeing that Flock this year pushed a software update to all of the LPR cameras that make them all video streaming capable. Will, are you familiar with that one?
Yes. Yeah.
So really, all of them can take video. Every single flock camera is video capable, and like Will was saying, it captures, it does capture pictures of car, but it captures images of anything that's in front of it as well. And DPD does use their mobile trailer specifically to look at people in an area. Thank you, Brittany. Drew, let's have him up.
Of oh, there we go. Sorry. Yeah, so Anaya was talking a bit about, and throughout my research, it seems like the public records request is a big part of, I'll say, showing the insecurities in the data, showing that anybody can kind of access this information. And I'll say, it seems like we want the good guys to access it to where the bad guys can't. That's kind of the vibe I've been getting from what I'm reading and researching and stuff. And so I guess my curiosity is, with the 22-ish places that have had them shut down, is there specific public records requests that are common like throughout these communities, or is it just kind of like you pry and get as much information as you can to where the city would say, okay, this is actually creating vulnerabilities now?
Uh, so yeah, the the public records, yeah, the mention of that was related to Washington State.
Okay.
There was a town there that had flock cameras, and somebody requested data. I think it was like for their personal license plate, to see like what images it took of that. They didn't want to turn it over, so I forgot who sued who, but yeah, there was a lawsuit involving this guy in the city, and he was trying to claim that like these are public records, you need to hand them over. And the judge determined that yes, they were public records and they did need to hand them over. And then they didn't hand them over because they didn't have access to it at the time because it took so long and the 30-day retention period expired. But it set a precedent that you could basically make a public records request in Washington at least and get those images. I know that probably would work on Durango because the entire reason I know Durango is on the national network is from a public records request in Washington. So if you can make a public records request in Washington for your vehicle or whatever, there's a good chance, I mean, they might try to push back, that you could actually get information from Durango.
And I can speak to that a little bit because I submitted the records requests back in October to Durango, and they did provide the network audit. I'd asked for network audit log and the way I phrased it, they only gave us the DPD searches, but they redacted a lot of the information from the audit log, and so that's another thing that they could do is they can remove a lot of information from the records request, and the rationale that the city attorney gave was that they were pertains to an active investigation. I don't know how that's true for almost 6,000 searches going back a year are all pertinent to an active investigation. One of the things that I want to do is talk to DPD about, can we, is there like after like a period of time, like, after like 3 months, can we get unredacted information on the audit logs or something like that? But definitely we want to keep pursuing that and seeing what more we can get from a records request. Deb, I'm going to go ahead and call on you next to ask unmute.
So this is like a little follow-up question to what we were just talking about, which is, and it's pretty basic. If the footage is supposedly deleted after 30 days in the local database, isn't it saved somewhere else?
Yeah, Will, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. So the 30-day retention period it's supposed to be on Flock servers. They're supposed to delete the information. What can be proven is that the agency no longer has access to it. So yeah, it could be deleted if they're being honest. It might not if they're not. However, you can export that data. Any Flock user who has access to what was collected can export that data, save it locally to their own computer, and then, well, it's there. And then they can just keep it, hold on to it. They can put it in their own database. They can do whatever they want with it.
And I think another thing was that, Flock has contractual clauses built into all these that allow them to save data indefinitely during that 30-day range. So, like, for example, Durango's contract has this section 5.3. If you go to the Flock terms and conditions, and it lists a whole list of reasons why Flock can choose to retain that data indefinitely. So there's no reason to believe that it actually is deleted after 30 days by Flock. Sarah, we'll call on you next.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to sincerely echo Laura's sentiment and just really a thank you all for bringing this conversation to Durango. Ben, I know you've gotten a lot of spotlight, but I also want to just thank Katya sincerely and Kirby and everybody that has been working behind the scenes, which I know is a huge crew of people. And I also just wanted to thank Mayor Yazzie for taking the time to be here and get informed. And I hope you take this back to City Council because we as a community are very concerned and you have the power to help us stop this. So thank you for being here and please listen. And hopefully you take this recording back to the city council and show it to them and get more informed because the police chief is not informed on this issue and these citizens are. So thank you so much for all of your work, all of you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you, Mayor Yazzie, we do really appreciate you taking the time to be here. And we will be sending a recording or a link to the recording to all of council. So Mayor Yazzie, you don't have to take that on yourself. We will send this to the rest of council. So don't worry about that. Who would like to come up next? We do have a question. A question that Kirby brought up and something that I've thought about is the New Hampshire license plate reader laws. They're some of the more restrictive in the country. One question that I have is Flock operating in New Hampshire and are they complying with the New Hampshire state statutes when they're operating there?
I was wondering the same thing. I heard mixed information from them. So they claim to operate in 49 states, everywhere except Alaska. So they're in Hawaii too. So that means they would be in New Hampshire, according to them. I also heard from a Flock representative in Coralville, Iowa, at a city council meeting that I was watching, that their minimum data retention is 7 days, and that would be in violation of that law. So I really don't know. I would hope they are, but I kind of don't expect them to be following that law.
I'm somewhat concerned that New Hampshire is not enforcing the LPR law that they have on the books when it comes to systems like Flock, because it is very restrictive about especially data retention. But if Flock is operating with a 7-day retention, that's in violation of the law. It might be the case where New Hampshire is not enforcing that, which is concerning. And yes, to the question, we will send an email out to all the registries with links to this recording, and so that you can watch it later or send it to folks. We will put this out there. Who else would like to speak or ask a question or make a comment? Let's see. Looking in the chat. That's a good question. How does Flock categorize no plate vehicles? Like, Will, do you know how Flock handles a vehicle that doesn't have a license plate?
Yes, I believe in their search tool, there's like a checkbox for like vehicles without plates. I haven't seen that in action. I'm not sure if that just means like it couldn't detect the plate. I'm pretty sure it means like vehicles with no plates. And you can search specifically for those. You can also, once you get results, pick a specific vehicle and then search that exact vehicle, kind of like a reverse image search. So like you find like you take a picture of like I don't know, a kettle or something that you want to buy, snap a picture of it, and then do like a reverse image search, and you can find that exact product. Flock offers the same thing, but for like pictures of vehicles. So once you find it, you can search it.
Thanks, Will. Someone asked about the sheriff's office versus the police department. And in our area, Fort Lewis College operates a network. The Durango Police Department operates cameras. I believe the sheriff's department has a flock contract, but I don't know that the county operates cameras. Because, Will, if you're buying flock services, you can purchase access to the flock network without having cameras, and then you can also do that and have cameras, correct?
Yes, I'm pretty sure there. I mean, like for example, I guess like Border Patrol. Well, I mean, they probably do have their. I don't think they have their own cameras. But there are some federal agencies like I guess the Postal Inspection Service. I don't think they have their own cameras. Railroad Police. I don't think they have their own cameras. And I'm trying to think. I know some law enforcement agencies get like a couple cameras, and I guess maybe that gives them access. I don't have a complete understanding of this, so I'm not sure. But I'm pretty sure, yes, you can just buy search access if you're a law enforcement agency.
Thanks, Will.
Mhm. I saw a question that I too have been wondering about, and I think we've talked about a little bit about this, Ben. Will, are you familiar with any alternative camera systems that maybe aren't as high risk, that would still serve a purpose for our police or other departments that maybe aren't as close to infringing Fourth Amendment rights or have room for so many errors, like we've been talking about?
Yeah. So I'm not sure. Most license plate reader systems are kind of copying Flock just because they're popular. So they're interested in collecting the data, like storing it for a period of time.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the dangerous part. I don't know of any license plate readers that are configurable so that it can just be hot list only or anything like that. And hot list only on device, that's like super important because once the data is in the cloud, it's at risk of being exposed to their own people. So yeah, I don't know of any. And I can't really say any vendors are better than Flock because yeah, like several of them have had like pretty big data breaches. And yeah, you can't really avoid data breaches. You can make things really strong, but hackers are always going to exploit the weakest link, and the weakest link is usually a human, and that human has access. So, for example, Flock, I guess I won't keep talking about this, but they had credentials for sale on the dark web because they didn't require multi-factor authentication. With that, they can basically pretend to be a human who has authorized access to it, perform searches. I'm assuming other vendors probably have similar exploits. So yeah, I don't know of any better solutions at the time. I mean, there is open source software and you can buy like your own cameras and run that on it. I guess that would be a bit safer. Open source is always better because you can actually see the source code and it's not like this mysterious black box that you don't know what it's doing. So yeah, I don't have a great answer for that. But yeah, all the popular vendors usually have pretty major flaws.
Well, we're also getting, I've gotten this a couple of times now, can you talk a little bit about the Flock Ring camera partnership or how home doorbell cameras are being integrated into Flock systems?
Yeah. They're expanding into other industries just because I think they're seeing that their license plate readers are not really liked by people, so they want to have other ways to make their money. And yeah, they're partnering with Ring. At the moment, I think police they can request footage from people who have Ring cameras. I don't think it's automatic at the time. Uh, yeah, I can't say like in a future software update if they'll hand it over. I can't say if Ring will hand it over themselves if they get a search warrant or a subpoena or something like that. Um, but yeah, they are partnering with Ring, so they have some level of access to Ring cameras that is supposed to currently require the owner's explicit consent. But yeah.
Anybody else? Is that any other questions we want to? I'll ask Brittany's again, but yeah, I mean, talking about in here in Durango, we have what's called an initiative process. So we do have a method where we can draft an ordinance, and that if it gets through legal approval and we get an amount of signatures in a period of time. So I think it's about 770 signatures in 30 days. Then that initiative would go to city council, and they can either adopt it on the spot as an ordinance or put it on the ballot. So that's kind of our local process that we have for if we want to do like a citizen initiative, and that's definitely something that we could potentially consider. I honestly I hope that we will be able to get our city council and our mayor to reconsider this. And but something that we are thinking about too is uh, we could work on drafting an ordinance that becomes a part of this initiative process. So that is something we can do. I think we're getting relatively close to the end. Does anybody else want to come off mute and have one more question for Will or us? I'll share my wrap up slide, but we can definitely take another question or two. But what I would say is, we've been asking, hey, what can we do about this? What are we going to do about this? And you're seeing some of it. I think part of it is educating about the system, and really, really appreciate Will and Anaya for being here today. They bring so much knowledge and expertise about these systems. And part of why we held this is to be able to um, learn about these systems together. We're over 1,000 total signatures for, between paper and the change.org. It's still important to share that. It does show how much local opposition there is to this. And we have gotten some media coverage, recently from the Herald and on the radio, KDR, KSUT, sharing that coverage as part of that education too. It's important that city council and the mayor and the police chief hear from you. The police chief believes that the system is popular. He believes that people support this system, and that by and large people like it and that they support it. And I think it's important to tell city council members, email them, call them. They hold in Durango. They have regular office hours, and those are always good to attend as well. And you can talk to the mayor and council members face to face. Go to city council. There is not another city council meeting in December, but we will be going back to talk to them in January. And if you're interested in getting involved with us further, send us an email. If you checked yes to volunteer on the sign up sheet, we'll be reaching out to you as well. And we will hit the ground running in January, and we're going to be continuing to work on this. And repeating something I said earlier, the police chief, they are interested in looking at whether some of the contract terms can be modified. They have taken the 287G issue pretty seriously. I mean, I think they are implementing a policy to prevent sharing with the agencies that have the ICE agreements. But the police chief is very committed to that 30-day retention period. He doesn't want to get that up. He does want to stay in the nationwide sharing program and wants to make sure that we're shared with hundreds of agencies around the country. And they really want to stay with Flock as a company, and that's part of what Will was saying earlier about how they're the biggest player. They have the most cameras. There's the most sharing available. They are the market leader. The police chief is not interested in, at least as of Friday, was not interested in evaluating a different company or a different system. They want to stay with Flock. They want to have the 30-day retention, and they want to share across the country with hundreds of agencies. They're willing to tweak some internal policy. They're willing to look at if some of the contract language can be changed. Um, and that's about it. That's kind of where the police chief is right now. Kaya, do you think that's a fair characterization? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Mhm.
Well, with that, it's right about 7 o'clock. I think we'll go ahead unless there's somebody else who wanted to chime in here. I don't see it. So thank you all so much for being here. It's been a great event. Thank you so much to Will and Anaya, Katya. Amazing job moderating this panel discussion. I certainly learned a lot. I hope you all enjoyed being here. We will make the recording available and we will post it and we will send it. Please share it so other people have a chance to see it and stay in touch with us and look out for some more things from us in January and have happy holidays for everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Good work.